The Justice Department filed charges yesterday against Democratic Congressman LaMonica McIver of New Jersey. McIver, seen here in the red blazer, is accused of assaulting and interfering with law enforcement officials earlier this month at an ICE facility in Newark. McIver says she was there to inspect the treatment of detainees at Delaney Hall. She says it was ICE agents who created an unsafe confrontation. Newark Mayor Ross Baraka was arrested during the clash, but his trespassing charge was later dropped.
You know, when you're living through history, you never know where you are in it exactly. I'm going to talk about this video in a minute, but that's a lesson I learned on 9/11. I was awakened on the morning of 9/11, 2001 by my sister around 8 o'clock, something in the 8 o'clock hour, which was way earlier than I normally got up. And she called from Georgia to tell me to turn on the TV. She said, turn on the TV. I'm like, what do you mean turn on the TV? What channel would I turn on? And she said, it doesn't matter what channel, just turn on any channel. I'm like, oh, okay. And I hung up the phone. I said, I'll do it later when I get up again. And I went back to the bedroom and started to try to go back to sleep. And suddenly I thought, wait, I lay there for a minute and I thought, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on? My sister calls me at 8 o'clock in the morning, which never happens, and she's telling me to turn on the TV to any channel? I thought something big must be happening. So I ran back into the living room and I turned on the TV, and sure enough, any channel, it didn't matter. It was the World Trade Center had just been, had a plane fly into it. I was stunned. I couldn't believe it. This place was literally not more than 2 miles away from where I lived in Manhattan. And I watched it, and I decided to go upstairs to the roof of our building where pretty much everybody in the building was at that point. We were all watching it from there. We could see it from our roof, and we saw the smoke coming out of the first building, the first World Trade Center. And it was pretty wild. We were stunned. We were a little scared. We didn't know if more attacks were going to take place in Manhattan. Maybe we were in danger being a little farther uptown. We didn't know. Anyway, I watched the smoke come out of the tower for a little while, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And it was kind of far away to see, so couldn't see that much. We could see the smoke, basically, was it. And I got a little bored with it. So finally I went back downstairs and decided to watch it on TV. When I turned on the TV, literally within 5 minutes of the time I'd come back down, suddenly we see a plane go around and hit the second tower. And I was like, whoa. So I go back upstairs and saw more. Now we see two plumes of smoke. But at that time, we didn't know that second tower was going to get hit. And now that both towers have been hit, we had no idea that in a few minutes one of them was going to collapse. No idea. So I watched the second tower, the smoke from that for a little bit, and then went back downstairs, turned on the TV, and suddenly the first tower collapses. It's like, whoa. We had no idea that was going to happen. No idea. And after all this was over, a few days later, I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about my dad, who was he fought in World War II. I thought, it occurred to me, he didn't know who was going to win. No one knew who was going to win. No one knew the outcome of that war, what it would be. I was born long after World War II. So, when I first learned about World War II, I already knew the end of the story. And it just seemed like a foregone conclusion. And when people tell me about the battles and that we had this battle and that battle, I'm like, yeah. So of course you knew you were going to win, right? But no, they didn't know. They didn't know. And it left a big impression on me. But, the connection I'm trying to make here is that I realized we'd been through a significant historical event that day. And, it was so weird living through it and realizing that as it was happening, we didn't know what was going to happen. And I think it's the same with how a democracy becomes a dictatorship. even in Russia, when Putin took over 20 years ago, it wasn't obvious what he was going to end up being at that time. We saw him gathering more and more power and changing their constitution so he could stay in power longer and longer. And all those things looked bad, but, for years, it wasn't obvious where he would end up. And so, yeah, it's the same with dictatorships. You could be living in a period, as we are now, where a man has become president who has obvious authoritarian tendencies. But you never know where exactly along the line from democracy to dictatorship you are at any given time. But I'm increasingly starting to feel that we're a lot farther along than even those of us who thought we were already pretty far along thought, which is kind of scary because I saw this coming in 2016, and it was obvious to everybody who could see and wasn't so biased and so determined to have their Republican man in office no matter what. But for the rest of us, I think it was pretty obvious what could happen. It didn't mean it would happen, but it was obvious the potential that this president had to take us in the direction we're going in now. So we just saw the clip of this New Jersey Congresswoman. I want to go back over it a little slower, and let's see if we can detect the crime here, because they're charging her with assault, which means assault is like the difference between assault and battery is assault is where you're making a threat, basically. You're scaring somebody into thinking you might do something harmful to them. But battery is when you actually do the harmful thing, like you hit them in the face or whatever. But, the way this administration twists the facts of every story, they could charge her with assault or battery. And it could be, let's say they charge her with battery where you do actual physical harm, like you hit somebody in the face. They're the kind of people who would take her brushing a hand away as an assault or as a battery. Or her looking at a law enforcement officer and saying, "What are you doing?" They would take that as assault. "Oh, you were threatening him." So let's take a look at this video again. Let me roll it back a little bit because this is interesting. Since I edit videos now, I can watch these things frame by frame. We'll do it quite frame by frame. But see that guy with the bald head and the yellow badge thing on his jacket? He works with a department called HSI, which is Homeland Security Investigations. And he is the one who is about to arrest her. In a minute, you'll see he has handcuffs in his hands. Now watch. See, you can see his hand going on her. His left hand right now is on her on her arm, it looks like. Okay? So now it comes off. She's like yelling, "What's going on? What's going on?" Is that a crime? No, that's not a crime. Okay. I'm not sure whose hand that is, but it's not hers, obviously. Okay, so anyway, she's in this crowd, and they're getting pushed around, and they have these law enforcement people kind of pushing up against them and threatening them a little bit. Now, look at this guy. He points his finger at her. Now, he looks threatening. To me, that's an assault right there. I would say that borders on assault. Okay? They would say that's an assault if she did that. Okay. Now, let's see what happens. Okay, get around this a little bit.
Newark. McIver said she was there to.
Now watch the hand. He's pointing at this man who she is with, kind of threateningly, like, "Hey, what are you doing? You got to stand back. You better shut up.
She says,
like, get off, get away." He doesn't want trouble, so he's trying to get this guy to get away, I think.
An unsafe conversation.
Okay, now we got a view. Things are getting a little rowdier. She is basically hugging this guy, I think, for protection, to stay away from the law enforcement guys. Now, look, you see in the law enforcement guy's right hand a pair of handcuffs. See that? So he's getting ready to do something. So yeah, look at this. Her hand, okay, this is interesting. Her hand goes up and his hand is on her arm. I'm sure they would say, oh, that's an assault or battery. I don't know which they would choose technically, but that's an assault. She assaulted him. She's waving, forcing his arm out of the way. I guarantee you it's something very flimsy like that. It's very, very flimsy. Okay. So that is the amount of violence and riotous violence that happened in Newark last week when the mayor of Newark went down there and this congresswoman went with him. Okay. So that's the extent of the violence. Okay. Now let's watch on January 6th, the extent of the peaceful protest. And I got to tell you, I watched this earlier. I think this should be required watching for every American at least once a month. Once a month, we all need to watch this because it was so kind of revealing to me how much I've kind of been sucked into believing, yeah, it wasn't that bad. Because you have these, I don't know which to play first, the congressman saying it was nothing or to play a little bit of this. Let me play a little bit of this first. But you have these Republicans saying, oh, it was just a normal tourist day at the Capitol. Nothing going on weird. But let's take a look at this footage from January 6th. Just compare this peaceful protest to the violent protests we just saw in Newark.
We're still taking metal, sharpened objects, missiles to include bottles and rocks, and hand-thrown chemical-grade fireworks.
I mean, just listen to the almost fear in that police officer's voice, the adrenaline raging through his system. He was like, guys, we got to do something here. This is an emergency. We got to, send some people in. Now, keep in mind, these police officers, who you see there, I believe those are police officers. Yeah. They are fighting to save the Capitol. They're doing what they think is the right thing to do. They're doing what they've been trained is the right thing to do. And now we have our president, all of his administration officials, all of his MAGA supporters saying, no, they're the bad guys. They are literally saying these police officers are the bad guys. Now watch them fight to try to restore peace here and to keep people secure. And look at that crowd. That's the crowd that the president says are the good guys. They didn't do anything wrong. No crimes committed here. I'm going to pardon them all. This is who he pardoned. These are the bad guys. This is upside down world. And if you're a Christian MAGA supporter, you got to ask yourself, how can you look at this and say, yeah, they're the bad guys. They're the bad guys. They're the good guys. How can you look at this and say these are the good guys? How can you say that their criminal trials were persecution by the government, political persecution? How can you say that? You look at this and you know these people are committing crimes. They're getting violent here. They need to be prosecuted. Look at that. All right, do you see this thuggery? You MAGA people who support this and say it's all good? Look at this. Does that look good to you? He's bashing the windows in. Is that a crime? Is that violent? That's what our president approves of and embraces and celebrates. That's what MAGA celebrates. So if you're a Christian, look at me. How can you look at me in the eye and tell me these are good people? They did a good thing that day. They weren't violent. They didn't commit any crimes. Tell me that after watching this. Tell me. I want to hear you tell me. Leave it in the comments. You know what? I know what you guys are going to do. You're going to get, part way through this video and you're going to say, that guy's not worth the time. He's a waste of my time. I'm not going to watch. Just like you wouldn't watch the January 6th hearings because your conservative propaganda media kept telling you it's a waste of your time. Don't bother watching because they didn't want you to watch. They didn't want you to see this over and over again. Because if you saw it, you could not walk away and say, these people are American heroes. You couldn't do that. You couldn't say they're not criminals. You couldn't say they're not violent. That's why they didn't want you to watch. So you didn't watch. You didn't want to waste your time. Unbelievable, really, really so disheartening. And since you didn't watch, you don't have an argument against people who, say this is violent because you didn't see it. You don't know what happened. So instead of arguing, like presenting persuasive arguments, you throw out insults. If you leave insults below, if that's your only response to this video, I'm not going to respond to it. Because when you respond with an insult, you are saying, I don't have an argument. I can't argue against what you're saying. I would have to agree with what you say. So the only thing I have left are insults. It means you're putting your agenda above the truth. And if you're a Christian, you should not be doing that. Look, I understand Christians voted for Trump, okay? But if you're a Christian Trump voter and you defend this, you defend what these people did, that's where you got to stop and think. You're not adhering to the truth. You're not following the truth. Your political agenda is more important to you than the truth. Now watch this guy. This is a congressman from Georgia, where I grew up. I feel shame that I'm from the state that he now represents, talking about what happened on January 6th. Listen to this guy. Listen to him twist the truth. And you MAGA supporters, a lot of you who say you're Christians, you agree with this guy. I've heard you tell me exactly what he said. Listen to this.
But let me be clear. There was no insurrection, and to call it an insurrection, in my opinion, is a bold-faced lie.
Okay, you can say there was no insurrection because it didn't succeed, but you can't say there was no insurrection attempt. That was obviously an attempted insurrection.
Watching the TV footage of those who entered the Capitol and walked through Statuary Hall showed people in an orderly fashion staying between the stanchions and ropes taking videos and pictures. If you didn't know the TV footage was a video from January the 6th, you would actually think it was a normal tourist visit.
Did that look like a tourist visit to you? And did you hear him say, this part gets overlooked? The tourist visit is what got all the attention. He said it looked like a normal tourist visit. Get out of here. Doesn't look anything like a tourist visit. But he also said the people were standing inside the building in an orderly fashion. Did you hear that? They're standing inside in an orderly fashion. There was nothing orderly about that at all. That is a lie. That's an out-and-out lie. And it's proven by the video I just showed you. So how can you support this? If you're MAGA, how can you support this? Even if you're not a Christian. There are a lot of MAGA supporters who aren't Christians, and they're admittedly so. But most of them say that they are. So either way, just being a decent person, how could you believe this? How could you watch these two videos together and believe they're true? Believe what, the MAGA leaders are saying is true. So you have that congresswoman from New Jersey who did absolutely nothing wrong. Compare her actions. Go back to the beginning of this video and compare her actions to the actions of the crowd at the Capitol on January 6th and tell me that she was violent. She was assaulting people. She needs to be arrested. And tell me those violent rioters at the Capitol need to be pardoned. Seriously, get out of here. Listen, this verse, Proverbs 17:15. You think no biblical passage or no biblical principles have anything to do with this? Listen to this. Proverbs 17:15. Acquitting the guilty and condemning the innocent, both are detestable to the Lord. If you acquit guilty people, like you pardon them, you issue them a presidential pardon, and you're not the president, but you support the president in doing that, that's detestable to the Lord. And you condemn the innocent? This woman, she's a Democrat. You may disagree with her on politics, but she did not assault anyone that day. And she is now being charged with assault by the Justice Department. That's detestable to the Lord. What do you put first? Your faith or your politics? If it's your politics, you've made an idol out of politics. That's detestable to the Lord as well. Think about it. I want you to think about that, okay? And that's all I got. So this was so stressful for me to watch all this. Doing these videos sometimes it's actually very stressful because I got to watch things that I wouldn't otherwise watch or read things that I don't really care to read anymore because I'm done. I'm tired of it, you know? But I feel like I have to speak out because I'm so surrounded by people who call themselves Christians and support everything this president does, even all of this. They support all of this. They defended January 6th, all of that. And it's so unchristian to support and defend these things because doing them is unchristian. It's not a Christian way of living. Not at all. All right. Anyway, I appreciate you watching. Let me know what you think below. And I will see you next time. Keep Christ first. Take care.